I'm Don. Let me just say thank you for joining me today on the Connecting Point podcast. We are in the middle of a brand new series that we've been working on called The Life of Joseph. This is episode number 3. I've actually titled today's episode Consequences, which might sound a little odd, but as we get through the story here, I think it'll start to make some sense. So, the life of Joseph, if you haven't watched or listened to the last 2 weeks' podcast, I would suggest that you go back and take a listen to those, because we're starting to introduce who this guy is. But those of you that are joining us today and maybe haven't had a chance to hear, we're talking about Joseph from the Old Testament, from the book of Genesis. He is actually the son of Jacob, also known as Israel, and not the Joseph that we find in the New Testament in the story of Mary and Joseph and Jesus' birth and that Joseph. It's not that Joseph. We're talking about the Joseph from the Old Testament. Last week, I told you about some dreams that Joseph had, and his brothers, they're not happy about it. There's some consequences to Joseph telling the dreams to his brothers, telling his dreams to his dad, his family. They're not happy with him, okay? And because of it, basically what's happened here is we've got a couple of dreams about how Joseph is going to be in charge. Now, these dreams really, literally were telling the future. They were predicting what's going to happen, spoiler alert, what's going to happen later in the story. But Joseph and his brothers, they're just not happy about this whole idea that Joseph would be in charge. And part of it stems from the fact that Joseph is number 11 out of 12 boys, so he's almost the youngest. So that kind of got the... all of a sudden, the rest of the brothers, they got the "you're not the boss of me" attitude when Joseph told them about his dreams. So I want to reread something I read last time we were together from Psalm 37. And this is, again, from the New King James Version in Psalm 37, verse 3. "Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land, feed on his faithfulness. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass." When God gives you a dream, when he places a desire inside of you, you just got to trust him. You've got to put all your trust in him. You need to trust that he knows what he's doing, even when the circumstances of your life, they might paint a completely different picture from the dream and the vision that God has given you, but you just need to trust him anyway. Just understand that he's going to bring that desire to pass in your life. And that's exactly what Joseph does. He just keeps trusting God and just trusting God. And so let's just read on today in verse 12 of Genesis 37. "Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, 'As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them.' 'Very well,' he replied." This part requires a little bit of backstory, okay? Joseph is saying to his dad, "No problem. Whatever you want me to do, I will do it. I'll go to Shechem." Joseph is saying this, knowing that Shechem could be a dangerous place for him and his brothers to be. You see, if we rewind back a little bit, we find out some bad stuff went down in Shechem. Earlier in the story, Dinah, who is Joseph's half-sister, was hanging out in this town called Shechem. And the problem is, while she was there, she was actually raped. She was raped by the prince of Shechem, whose name also happened to be Shechem. They were very creative people. As you can imagine, Dinah's brothers, Simeon and Levi, they're furious. They're not happy about this, right? Their sister has been assaulted by this guy Shechem, so they go and they confront the king. His name was Hamor. This is where the story gets a little crazy. They managed to convince the king that if the prince is going to stay with their sister Dinah, that all the men of Shechem will need to be circumcised. Yeah, you heard that right. They convinced this guy, you all got to be circumcised if Prince Shechem is going to be with our sister Dinah. I guess in that day when kings say that you're going to be circumcised, you're going to be circumcised. That's just going to happen. I would have been like, what you talking about, king? No, not going to happen. So all the men in Shechem, as adult men, not babies, like it's normally done, right? The adult men in Shechem, they get circumcised. And while they're all lying around in pain because someone's just cut off their, you know what it is, right? You know what's going on. Simeon and Levi, they bust in the city. They got swords. They kill every single man in Shechem. But they didn't stop there. After that, they robbed the place. I'm not kidding. I'm not making this stuff up. This is the actual story that took place in Shechem. Jacob was absolutely, as a dad, like he's so mad with them. I mean, this one act right there, it could have incited all the other people living around them. You got to remember, like they're living in a place that was not their original home. They're strangers in this place. So he's looking at this like this could incite all the other people living in that area, and they could have squashed Jacob and his family. They could have just crushed them, destroyed them. It could have gone really, really bad. So now Joseph's brothers, they're back in town, back in the same town where they knew people wanted to kill them. And Jacob is sending Joseph to go check on them. Like Joseph knows what he's walking into, and he knows he's walking into the danger zone. And when Joseph shows up in Shechem, he's not here to tell on them or to cause them any harm. He's just there to check on them. I mean, that's what his dad sent him to do. And the thing is, he really does care about them. These are his brothers. He loves them. He cares about them, and he goes to see them, and he only to find out like they're not even there. So then he heads down to Dothan, and because he heard like they had gone down to Dothan, so his brothers see him coming, but they see him like from a distance. It's amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, like you can see this guy coming, right? It's like oh look, here comes the dreamer. Like that's their attitude. It's like in verse 20 it says, "Come now, let's kill him and throw." They're talking about their brother. Let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Like we'll show him. Like. We'll just throw him in a pit. So then that's the first thing they do once he gets there. They rip the coat off his back. Not a coincidence that they did the same thing to Jesus, right? Again, I told you as we started this series that there's going to be some parallels between the life of Jesus and the life of Joseph. So they rip the coat off his back. No coincidence the same thing happened to Jesus before they beat him and they took the robe off of his back. Verse 24, they took him and threw him into the cistern. So they throw him in this pit. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat their meal. They looked at like, oh, there's our brother. Let's beat him, rip his coat, throw him in a pit. Hey, what, you guys hungry? I'm hungry. Let's eat. Can you eat? I can eat. Let's eat. It's like, they look up. They saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they're on their way to take them down to Egypt. And I was like, isn't that nice? I was like, they throw him in a pit, they sit down, and they eat lunch. Then along come these Ishmaelites, and then in verse 28, so when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. They've sold Joseph, but there's a problem, okay? How are we going to tell Dad? Like, who's telling Jacob? I'm not telling Jacob. You tell him. I'm not telling him, right? Verse 31, then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in the blood of the goat. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, we found this. Examine it to see whether it's your son's robe. Like, they know it's his, but they go back to their dad like, I don't know. We found this thing. It's bloody. I don't know. Did it belong to Joseph? Talk about cold, right? They didn't even say his name. They're not like, is this Joseph's coat? Like, we're worried about him. Is this his coat? No, they go back to dad and they're like, is this your son's robe? You know that one son. This is cold. Isn't it funny how Jacob is fooled by the blood of a goat? He thinks that his son is dead, and if you rewind the clock in Jacob's life, you find out that he used a goat to fool his dad into giving him the birthright. Like, it's, to me, that's kind of fun. It's like, I don't know. It's not funny, but it's like, it's an interesting juxtaposition between what's happening now to Joseph and what Joseph did previous in his life. So again, consequences, right? So that gave him his birthright. So check it out sometime. Read Jacob and Esau. Go back and read that. I'm telling you, you reap what you sow. That's what happens. Now it's easy to look at the story and think like, man, this is bad. Like, how does it get worse for Joseph? Like, this is a bad situation. But you know what? He's alive. He is alive. And we know that Simeon and Levi, those are some bad dudes. And we know that they would not hesitate. They would not hesitate to kill someone, right? They've done it before. They could have killed Joseph. They killed a whole town. In fact, they didn't just kill a whole town. They they convinced them to circumcise themselves. Then they killed them, and then they stole all their stuff. So, like, Simeon and Levi, his brothers, Joseph's brothers, are some bad dudes. They could have just killed him. They could have killed Joseph. So look at it this way. If God had not sent those Ishmaelites along when he did, Joseph would have either been left for dead in the pit, or they would have pulled him out and killed him, or just killed him in the pit. I don't know. Let me ask you this question. If you're living with 9 brothers who absolutely hate your guts and they want to kill you, is that a good situation? Let me just ask. Is it good? I mean, really, is it is it that bad to get away from that situation? Like, 9 of these people don't even like you. You know, out of the 12 brothers, he has out of the 12 of them, he has 11 brothers. 9 of them hate his guts. He wanted to yeah, I don't know. It's maybe not the worst situation to get out of. So Joseph, so the thing to understand is he made some bad decisions. He told his brothers and his mom and dad about his dreams. Not great decision making for this 17-year-old young man. But despite all of that, you know, God has a plan for Joseph's life, and it is so much bigger than any mistake that he could have made, right? And any consequences that might come because of it. Like, the plan is still bigger. And he wanted to put Joseph in a position of power. That's what God wanted to do. So God made a way for him. You see, life doesn't always work out the way that we want it to. But that doesn't make it bad necessarily. We just got to look at things the way that God looks at them. And I believe God is ready to make a way for you today. I believe that to be true. In fact, I just want to pray for you right now. I want to pray that exact thing. God, I just pray right now for anyone who is listening to the podcast, watching the podcast online right now, anybody that can hear my voice. I want to pray for them right now, God, that you would reveal the plan that you have for their lives to them, that they would see that, and they would see the situations and the circumstances of their lives the way that you see them. God, I know it is easy to become discouraged when things don't happen right away. We're in that microwave society where we want things right now and we don't want to wait, and it's hard to be patient. So God, I'm praying right now that you would give the people that are listening to this message eyes to see the way that you see, to see the future and the hope, God, that you have planned for each and every single one of them. In Jesus' name. Hey, God bless you. Thanks for joining me today. The Lord bless and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace.